You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number, 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency?
None of this is made up. This is 100% honest. I mean, I don't have time. I tell people all the time, there's nothing in this field. There's no money. There's no parades. There's no anything. And I'm a really busy person, and, I don't have time to make shit up. And anybody that is doing that or hoaxing people or whatever, they need to push them out of this field, because it's stopping the process of really finding out what's going on, or what these beings are, or how long they've been here, or whatever. And, before this happened, I started hunting when I'll just give you a little backdrop about me.
Yeah.
I started hunting when I was, I think, 24. I was married. My ex-wife bought me a crossbow for Christmas. And so I started hunting, didn't know anything about deer hunting, fished all my life, fished all around my town. My friend and I on Saturday would ride our mopeds 10, 15 miles outside of town. We knew good fishing spots. So I always fished, but I never really gun hunted for anything, any of that. So I thought about going out and start deer hunting, and I got a crossbow. So I jumped in with both feet. I didn't know anything about the sport. I didn't know anything about big bucks. I'm trying to research all this because I'm a researcher. So, I'm trying to research all this stuff. And I remember being like 9 years old, and I saw a program called In Search Of. You've probably heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Leonard Nimoy was on it.
Love that show.
Yes, it had UFOs, all that stuff. I got some UFO stories too. I've actually seen 3 or 4 real UFOs. No bullshit. I've seen them. But I remember seeing Patty. Of course, I didn't know her name was Patty at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in school and I was in reading class, and we had to do book reports. So we got to choose a book, and we used to fill this paper out, and then our teacher would bring money in, and our teacher would put these orders in, and it seemed like it took forever. We had to wait forever to get these books. And I got a book on Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, and I can't remember the other thing was. So I kind of saw Patty in this book first, but then a couple years later, when I was 9 or 10, I saw the actual thing on In Search Of. And in my frame of mind, I was like, well, this is out in the Pacific Northwest. If this is real, it looks real, because I've always had an open mind in life. I've never had a closed off mind. But if this is real, it's out in the Pacific Northwest. That's clear out in the other part of the country. Not knowing now that they're all over the place.
Right.
They've migrated all over.
Right.
I know a lot about Gigantopithecus. I know a lot about the Bering Strait, which I believe they came across that landmass down in through Alaska, British Columbia, Canada, down into California, and then migrated across the United States. I mean, New York, Texas. I mean, I've listened to all kinds of people's accounts. About every night I'm listening to somebody tell an account of what they've went through. In fact, the crazy thing about all this is you and I are talking right now, and somewhere somebody is in a national park somewhere being escorted out by some of these things, or, they're walking next to them where they can't see them, but they're pushing them out. So that's how crazy all of this is. But, I never thought in my wildest mind, once I started hunting, that this would happen to me. And, every time I went in the woods before this happened, Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Yeti or none of that was on my mind. I was going in there to kill big bucks. I wanted to get big bucks. I wanted to put big bucks on my wall. I wanted, every time I do something, I throw 110% at it. Like, I want to be the best at it.
Right.
Not always am I going to be the best at it. but I want to be the best at it. So I'm going in, I'm hunting in Wayne National Forest. That's 9,000 acres down in Ohio. I hunted up in Michigan when I lived in Michigan where this took place. Here in Indiana, I hunt beyond my house. I have a pretty big woods beyond my house. So I've hunted in quite a few states and went in there with no fear of anything. I've seen coyotes, bobcats, all kinds of stuff. Never bear because of where I live. We don't have any bear. There's no moose, elk, or any of that. But I have been out to Colorado and I've been 25 yards from a big bull elk. Just when they got done with their mating season, there was one I was there on vacation and we were going out to the national park and I seen some turkeys. So I told my girlfriend, hey, turn around, there's turkeys. I'll call to them because I can call to them with my voice. And we pulled up as these turkeys were in this guy's driveway, and I looked back there, and there's a big bull elk grazing in someone's backyard. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a bull elk. And I shot out of the car, and my girlfriend's son got out, and my girlfriend's yelling at me, don't you go up there, But anyways, going in the woods or a forest or whatever, I never had any fear. Bigfoot wasn't even on my mind, dude, at all. After I saw that when I was 9, I put it in my mind that, hey, I'm never going to run into that anywhere because they're not here. They're out in the Pacific Northwest or Oregon or somewhere out there. I'm not going to run into one.
Right.
So in 2000, I lived in Michigan. I lived in Frankenmuth, Michigan, and I hunted in a town of Mayville, Michigan, and it was about, as the crow flies, about an hour and 45 minutes from where I lived. So I met this couple. They came to a gig of mine. I used to play on the road, and that's how I met them. And we just got talking about hunting, and he said, well, I've got over 200 acres, and, I don't let a lot of people hunt it. If you want to come out and bow hunt sometime, you're more than welcome to. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I said, I'm always looking for somewhere new to hunt. He's like, yeah, come on over. He's like, I don't care. You can just be the only person behind my house that, can bow hunt it. So I'm thinking, oh, this is great. And he said, I got all kinds of deer. I got huge bucks. I'm thinking, this is the mother lode. This is going to be great. And I think I was like 35 at the time. I was in my mid 30s. And so, I went over there in October and, I was hunting and, going in there in the dark. You know how you're a deer hunter.
Oh, yeah.
You go in the woods in the dark, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you get set up, you get ready for the bucks coming out of the field or going back to their bedding area. And the thing of it was, this woods was huge. He owned like 200 acres and he owned some across the street, a lot of pine trees, dirt road in Michigan. A lot of roads are dirt road. And, the setup of this whole place is, this woods was probably over 1,000 acres. I mean, it was pretty good sized woods for in Michigan. And the woods was actually 50 or 60 feet to the bottom, lower than his house. So you would have to walk downhill.
Oh, okay.
In behind his house to get into the woods. And this was in November. I don't know the exact date. I tried to think of it the other day, the exact date, but it was during the rut. And there was a lot of deer that moved in there. And, you could spook deer really easy because there was a lot of foliage on the ground, a lot of leaves. And, it was starting to get cold. And so, I got up one morning and I'm like, well, I got to hurry up and get over there. So I took a shower, got all my gear together, got in my car, and I headed for there. And I got over there. I pulled in. I always parked in front of their house. They had a garage that wasn't attached across from their house. So I would always, they told me just park over there. So here's the uncanny, creepy thing about the whole start of this. I got out of my car, and the thing I noticed right away was it was so damn quiet that I could hear my ears ring. Now, if you're a hunter, you've had those moments where it's so dead still, like you can hear it ringing in your ears. And I had never, ever, the whole time I've been hunting, ever experienced that. Like I've been out, it's been quiet, but I never could hear ringing in my ears. I was just really uncanny and kind of creepy. Like you could have heard a pin drop on the ground. I mean, seriously.
Wow.
And I thought, that's weird. I don't hear any crickets. I don't hear any tree frogs. I don't hear nothing, like absolutely nothing. And I've walked in this woods before in the dark, and I had a turkey or two roosted in a pine tree, and they took off. And I don't know if you've ever heard a turkey fly, but they're loud. When they get those big,
it's a ruckus.
Oh my God, dude!
Yeah.
It'll put your heart in your throat. That's enough to scare you right there.
Oh, I know. It's
So
they're breaking limbs coming out, and they're just
yeah,
flopping
I've
all
had
over the
that,
place.
and jumped. So so I thought, man, this is really weird. Like, it's just really quiet. It's too quiet. So I went around my car, got my gear out, got my bow out, got my flashlight out, because I never walk in the woods without a flashlight on. And I'm the type of person, when I turn the flashlight on, I put it on my thigh and I walk with it like that. So when I get to the inside of the woods, I can kind of turn the flashlight to the right or the left, and I can kind of see where I'm going, so I don't trip over a limb or whatever, because I've done that before and fell flat on my face, and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, I got my gear. I started down the 2-track. If somebody is listening doesn't know what a 2-track is, a 2-track is basically wide enough. You can drive a 4-wheeler, you can drive a car down through it. It's pretty wide trail down in through the woods. So I started down this 2-track, and I got down behind the homeowner's home and went to go in the woods, because I went in the same spot all the time. And then when I got in the woods, and I got to back this up too, there was no moon. Okay. When this happened, there was no moon.
Okay.
Like, it was pitch black. So, it's dark enough on the outside of the woods, but if you've hunted, when you get on the inside of the woods, you can't see your hand in front of your face.
Right.
You can't see nothing. Like, it's hard to see trees unless you're right up, on them. You can't see. It's pitch black. So I go into the woods. Now this 2-track turned to the right. And so I turn to the right, and now I'm walking south down this 2-track. And then the 2-track is going to stop, and it's going to go to the left. So when I got to where the 2-track stopped and I was going to turn and go to the left, I was facing south. Okay. When I turned to the left, now I'm facing east. So I started walking down the 2-track east. And then there's a game trail that comes into the 2-track and butts up into it and stops. And I would turn right and go down that game trail. Now I'm going south again. Okay.
Okay.
I went, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 steps, and I stepped on a limb, and it cracked. It went crack like that.
Okay.
And to my right, about 30 yards from me, something got up. It was on the ground, and it got up, and it was so big. It made so much noise. There was leaves all over the ground, right? And when there's a lot of leaves on the ground, you got to walk really, really slow so you don't spook anything in the woods.
Oh, of course.
This thing got up. It sounded like a tank getting up. I wish I could have recorded it. I mean, it was so loud getting up, like it was sweeping legs to get up underneath it to get up. And it made so much noise that I froze. I literally froze. When I stepped on that and heard all that commotion getting up, I froze and I was bent over. And I heard this thing get up, and it took 5 steps on a half circle in behind me on that 2-track, and it stopped, and it didn't take any more steps. And I'm sitting there bent over with this flashlight on my thigh, and I'm like, what the hell is that? because this thing is huge, and I don't have anything in here huge. I don't have any elk. I don't have any moose. I don't have any grizzly bear. I don't have anything that weighs 6, 7, 800,000 pounds. This thing sounded like a tank. It was huge. But the creepy thing was it tried to be stealthy. Like I could hear it popping limbs, but it was trying to be stealthy as it moved. If you can understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it went in on that 2-track at the end of that game trail and stopped. And it stood there. And I'm still bent over. And my mind is telling my body, Scott, straighten up. Straighten up, dude. And I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. Like I was immediately in fear. Like I felt terrified because I had never had anything like this happen to me in my life. And I'm bent over and I can't straighten up. And whatever it is standing directly behind me. Did I think it was Bigfoot? No. It still was not in my mind that it was a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I was just like, you know, is there a bear that migrated down here? What the hell is this thing?
Right.
Because it's huge. So it stood there, and I stood there, and I'm still bent over. And it seemed like 5 minutes, and it was probably like 60 seconds or a minute and a half. And I thought, for some reason, I don't know why, I thought, I'm going to take this flashlight off my leg, and I'm going to shine over to the right of me. Why? You know, it's in behind me, but for some reason, I thought maybe I could see it. So I popped that flashlight up, and I looked all over where it was, and I looked over my right shoulder, and I couldn't see it. And immediately, fear really set in, and I put that flashlight back to my leg, and I went, you big dummy. That thing is directly standing behind me, and now it knows exactly where you are. Because I know nothing about Bigfoot in this moment. I don't know if they can see at night. I don't know if they have the retina shine, you know, like a lot of animals do, because they can see nocturnally.
Right.
We have it. You know, if you shine your flashlight on somebody in the dark, you can kind of see it in our eyes. So I don't know if this thing can see me, but I'm thinking this thing now knows where you are. And to be honest with you, Lance, I thought I was a goner. I really thought that this thing was going to come down this trail and snatch me up, and I was going to be gone. All kinds of things were flashing in a matter of seconds in my head. I'm not going to see my kids no more. I'm not going to see my wife. I'm just here to hunt. You know, this thing's going to come down, and whatever it is, it's going to get me and tear me apart, and that's it. So I'm standing there, you know, bent over still. Right. And finally, I'm like, I start to straighten up. I don't know how I did it, but I just straightened straight up. And I started to get a little bit ease because I didn't hear this thing moving. I knew it was behind me somewhere, but I'm in the pitch black. I can't see my hand. I got a bow in one hand, my flashlight in the other. And I'm sitting there going, what am I going to do? Do I take steps and move forward towards my stand? Do I run? What do I do? And here's the crazy thing. I was on Matt Knapp's podcast, and he stopped me and he said, you know what? He said, did you ever figure out that thing closed the distance off on you and it was blocking your way out of the woods? And I went, oh my God, I never thought about that. Now I'm getting goosebumps right now, but I never thought about that. It stopped directly behind me, so I couldn't walk back down the trail and get out of the woods, because I'd have to go right past it to get back to the 2-track and get out the woods.
Which way was the wind blowing?
There was no wind. There was no wind. It was dead still. Okay. Nothing. No wind, dude. That's why it was so quiet. There was no breeze, no nothing. I mean, you could have heard a mouse fart. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
That was one thing before I even went in the woods. It was so creepy to me because it's just too dead still. It's too quiet. And I've heard other people tell their accounts, and they had the same situation, that, you know, they had ringing in their ears too, that it was real quiet. And it was so uncanny. So I'm standing there and I'm like, look, I got to get to my stand. So I'm just going to start walking. So I would walk 4 steps, it would start to walk. Now it's going to the east. I'm going south down this trail. It's going down the 2-track. And I would take 4 steps and stop, and it would take 5. It would take one more step, and I could hear it, and it would stop. And then it would stand there. And it was almost like it was saying to me, okay, this is a chess match. So now you made your move. I made my move. Now what are you going to do? And it was just creepy because there was no growling. There was no mind speak. There was no howling, nothing. It was just dead, quiet, stealthy. Okay. But I could hear it popping limbs every time it took a step. So then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go again. So I took another 4 steps. It starts walking. I stop. It takes another step. So it's giving itself away. I can kind of know where it is. The third time I did that, I walked 3 or 4 steps. I stopped, and it walked again. I had 100 yards to go to my stand. And I'm like, screw this. I'm popping this flashlight up, and I am hauling ass for my stand because I am really creeped out now. The hair's up on the back of my neck, and I'm like, this is really creeping me out. I knew this was no deer. I've spooked deer before. You've probably spooked deer. They jump up. They start running. They sound like a horse galloping. They'll stop maybe, but once they find out you're a predator, they're snorting and they're down the woods letting everything in the woods know there's a predator in here. This did not do that. It was very cunning and very stealthy, and it just would walk when I walked. That's not a deer. You know that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay?
I can tell you what it's not, and that's not a bear. It's not a deer.
No.
Yeah.
No deer is going to, because I've jumped deer out of their bedding area where they're bedding in the dark, and they take off. And no deer gets up and makes all this noise and then walks in behind you and stands there.
No. Yeah.
Deer don't do that, man.
No.
They just don't do that. That's not an animal like that. They're not going to, neither does a coyote or a bobcat. They're not going to do that.
No.
So this thing is now to the east of me, and I'm like, screw it. I'm running for my stance. So I pull this flashlight up and I take off, and I'm running like a sprinter. Well, when I start to run, I got goosebumps. When I start to run, this thing starts to run.
Oh, dang.
It takes off, and it starts to parallel me. And, dude, I'm telling you right now, the footfalls, it sounded like a freight train going down through the woods. And the footfalls, all I kept hearing was thump, 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 thump. That's all I heard. And, in between each footstep was 5 or 6 seconds. So I'm thinking to myself as I'm running, this thing is huge because it's taking great big strides. It's not running like I am. This is taking big strides. There's 5 or 6 seconds intervals between each step.
Jeez.
And dude, it was so loud. The thumping noise was just, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I can't believe I'm hearing this. And it's paralleling me. Now, I got to my stand. I got to my pine tree, and I'm about 27 feet up. I dropped my flashlight a couple times because I was shaking. Now I got adrenaline in me. And this thing stopped running, and now it's starting to walk. And I can hear it in the swamp. I can hear it in the water, hitting the water with its feet. And I'm climbing, I hooked my bow on, and I'm climbing up in my tree. And I got up in my tree. I pulled my bow up, hooked my bow on. I put my safety harness, hooked my safety harness in, and I just sat down as I'm hearing this thing walk. And I got all this adrenaline dumped in my body, and I got my face in my hands, and I'm shaking. I mean, incredibly shaking, almost like buck fever, or almost like I just shot a deer. You know how you have that adrenaline?
Oh, yeah,
dump?
absolutely.
You're standing there the whole time waiting for that deer to come in shooting range, and your heart's beating out of your chest, and you're hoping that deer isn't going to hear your heart pounding in your chest, and then when you finally, hit it, you hit that deer and it takes off, you got to sit down. And I had to sit down. I was shaking so hard I thought I was going to fall out of my stand. So I hear this thing walking, and then it's walking like southeast of me, and I can hear it, and all of a sudden it stops. And I don't hear nothing. And I'm sitting there with my face in my hands going, did this just, I mean, what just happened here? Did this just happen? I mean, are you kidding me? You know,
Right.
what the heck's going on? And I also said, God, please don't let this thing come back towards me. Don't let it come back around me, because, you know, I didn't know anything about them pushing trees over. I knew nothing about Sasquatch in 2000. The internet was just fresh. I knew nothing about the BFRO, nothing other than I remember the Patty video of this big thing walking that looked so huge and so big. And I'm like, I think this is a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And just as I got that out of my head, I heard it start to walk, and it went to like a run again, and then it went back to a walk, and then it got out to a tree. It must have been around a tree, because it started tearing limbs off a tree. And I'm hearing this pop, crack, pop, pop, crack. And, you know, it's so dead still. It sounded like it was like right in front of me, and it was probably 75, 80 yards from me. And it's just ripping the limbs off this tree. And I'm thinking, you got to have hands to do that. Like, you can't, you know, there no raccoons doing that.
Oh, right.
No deer doing
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, there's nothing that can do that. I'm the only thing in here that has hands, you know. And it's like, I'm sitting there, and my mouth is open, and I'm like listening to what I'm hearing. And this thing is, I bet it spent 10 minutes tearing limbs off this tree. And I mean ripping them off aggressively. And then I hear it go to my right, and then it walked out, and then I couldn't hear it no more. So I usually hunted till about 9:30, 10 o'clock. By then, deer would move through, and I was pretty much done for the day. And I'd either have to go back home, or I'd spend the day there. I'd just go get a sandwich or get something to eat, then go back and, you know, around 3 or 4 o'clock and hunt for the evening. I sit up in that stand until about 11:30. I couldn't get down. I was so tore up and frightened and scared. I was terrified that I couldn't get down out of that tree. I couldn't physically muster to climb down it. I was still shaking after all that time. I was scared to death I was going to get down and it was going to come after me.
Were you on a ladder stand, or how were you?
No, tree steps, screwed in a tree.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, no ladder stand, none of that.
Well, I bet you got up fast.
Yes. Yeah, I climbed up because, you know, I'd been up in that tree a lot, and I could climb up in it in the dark. No problem. I didn't have a problem with that at all. I knew right where everything was. But I was afraid of falling out of the tree. And I'm like, you know, I got to get down out of this tree, and I got to get out of here. I can't sit up in this tree all day. So finally I lowered my bow down, I unhooked my harness, and I got down that tree lickety split. I unhooked my bow, got my gear, and I was, you know, I hunted this bull. Okay, I should have set this up too. My bad. But I hunted this 25-foot ridge, and I was up 20 feet. And it was like, picture a bull around my back, and then the bull broke off in front of me, and it went down into the swamp. So you'd have if you walk behind me, you'd have to climb up a ridge 25 feet to get over it.
Gotcha.
And then the ridge went down to about 3.5, 4 feet, and you'd have to walk over the ridge to get out of the area where I was hunting, and then down the game trail. So I got over that small part of that bowl, and, you know, I took off down that game trail. And you know, years later, I told a couple of my friends, and they were like, well, did you go look for tracks? Did you go try and find the tree? I'm like, dude, I wanted to get the hell out of there. I didn't want to be around there any more than I had to.
Mm-hmm.
So I got down that game trail. I got to that 2-track. As I was going down that game trail, I looked over to my left because I kind of knew the area where that thing got up. And I remember looking kind of out of the side of my face as I'm moving. Okay, that's where it was. And then it was here. And then I got up that 2-track, and I got my gear in my car, and I went home. And I went home for the next month, and my ex-wife at the time was like, every day she was like, why aren't you going over and hunting? Why aren't you going over there? I don't understand. And I'm thinking every excuse I can, because I'm so scared to go in that woods, that it's like, you know, I will do this and help you with the kids, or I can hunt some woods around here, or, whatever. So I was like terrified.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, I stayed home, about the whole month of December. And I remember getting up one night. It was like, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep because this like consumed me. It was on my mind all the time. And I did not want to tell anybody, because I didn't want anybody to think I was cuckoo. I didn't tell anybody in my family. In fact, I just told my youngest sister, I have 4 sisters. I just told my youngest sister as of last year about this. I never told anybody in my family, because I didn't want them to think I was nuts and crazy, because this is what you get with this field and these things that happen like this. People think you're nuts, like you've lost it.
Oh, I know.
Like you're insane or something.
Right.
And
right.
I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want this getting out. I didn't want to lose things. So I was sitting in my living room, and it was like, I don't know, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I thought to myself, dude, if you don't get back over in that woods and you don't go over and hunt, you are going to sell everything, and you're never going to go in the woods ever again. And, this is part of my life, and this has been my passion for 10 years. Like, I love doing this. And, I just sat there and I debated all early morning long. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go over there Saturday morning, and I'm going to go back in there and hunt. So here's the thing. I didn't go back in the woods in the dark, and I didn't go out of the woods in the dark for 17 years. I would not go into the woods in the pitch dark. No more 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. I went at first light. Mm-hmm. When the sky's pink and the sun's going down, mm-hmm. and it's starting to get dark in the woods, but you can still see on the outside of the woods.
Right.
I pop my flashlight on. I'm out of that tree, and that's when a lot of big bucks move.
Exactly.
So I missed a lot of hunting. I missed a lot of good hunting opportunities because I'm trying to get past this, and this really shook me. And I listened to your thing on Matthew's thing, how you went running in the forest,
yes.
In the pitch black and the pitch dark to get past your dad scaring you.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you, you got bigger kahungas than I do, Lance. I could not do, there's no way I could do that. So for you to go out in the middle of nowhere and run, and where there's all kinds of animals that could probably get you, you're a better man than me. But getting back to me, so it took me 17 years. I mean, I could not go back in the woods in the dark. I mean, now I do, but it's in the back of my mind. Like when I go hunting in Ohio, and I go hunting with some of my best friends, and we get to a place and we all split up to go to our sections of where we're going to hunt, it's always in the back of my mind. I don't think it will ever not be in the back of my mind. But here's the crazy thing. This story isn't over. I hunted in there for 3 more years.
Oh, wow.
Because I was bound and determined, even after this happened, I'm head to toe goosebumps right now. Every time I tell this, my heart starts racing. It's like I'm there all over again. And it's the reason why I do this is, one, I want to make people aware that this is real. This isn't folklore. This isn't some made up thing, Slim Jim commercial, screw with Bigfoot. I mean, people ask me, do you believe in them? It's not if I believe in them. It's I know they exist because of what I heard. I didn't have to see it. I heard how giant it was.
Yes.
I heard how big. I heard it tear those limbs off that tree. Okay? That's not anything else in there.
Well, that's just it. You know what it's not, and so when you do the process of elimination,
Right.
Occam's razor, you just go, okay, what is the likelihood? There's nothing that can tear limbs. No human being has that, that torque strength to do that. It's just there's nothing.
Yeah. And here's the thing I want to tell you before I go into the next part of this. I found all kinds of tree breaks. In 10 years of hunting, I found tree breaks in Ohio. Wherever I hunted, I would go in and scout. I would find some tree breaks. And I would sit there. Sasquatch was not in my mind. I would sit there and go, this tree is broke up. Like that's 6.5 to 7.5 feet up. And the rest of the tree is fine. And the tree's broke and it's a young tree and it's green or it's really white. That's not snow load. I've had trees out in front of my house that had ice load or snow load on them, and they're bent all the way over, and they didn't break. Okay, they just pop up when all the ice goes away or the snow. But these are broke, like something snapped it. And then I found trees that were twisted, like torqued. So not only were they broke, but something twisted it. Okay, and this woods I was hunting in Michigan, I found 5 tree breaks in there. Now I know what it is.
Yeah.
Over 150 yards, over a football field and 50 yards, I found tree breaks in a row. And I'm sitting there going, over the course of hunting, when I would see these, it's like, okay, that's not snow load. That's not wind. If a wind breaks a tree, it's just going to fall over. And it's going to fall over pretty much closer to the base than it is going to break off in the middle of the tree or 7 feet up or 6.5 feet up. And then there's no other trees damaged around it. Why is just this one tree broke over and no other trees? I grew up with a lot of common sense, Lance. I was raised with common sense. If you step in dog poop and it smells like dog poop, it's dog poop. It's not anything else.
Exactly.
That's the type of person I grew up and the man I've become. If my stomach tells me back out of here, I'm backing out of here. I'm not pressing it. If I see a tree break and there's no other trees broke, that's not the wind doing that. And when you see them in a row, you keep going and you see another one, and then you see another one, and then you see another one. Something ain't right here.
That's right.
Something's fishy going on. And I found them. Before this ever happened, I found all kinds of tree breaks, all kinds. And I always thought to myself, this is probably how dingy I am. I'm like, well, maybe a big buck came up here and took his rack because they rub on trees. Maybe just went nuts and just ripped this tree over. That's what my mind would tell me. You know what I mean? Because
right. Well, you're going with what's your reference. That's your reference, and so that's what you're applying it to.
Right, and your mind's always going to tell you something other. It's going to try and compute it and wash it out, and your mind's not going to let you go into shock. I think I came pretty close when I had this first excursion with this thing. I was pretty close to shock. I was shaking so bad, like I was hyperventilating, that I couldn't control it. And like I said, I had to sit down while I listened to this thing rip limbs off a tree. And so, I went back in there, but I would not go back in the dark. I would not come out in the dark. And I would get in there, and I would be in there, like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, sitting in my stand. And to the south of me, I would hear a tree knock. I would hear just a pop, and I mean really loud. And about, 4 or 5 minutes later, 6 minutes later, to the north of me, I'd hear another pop, really loud. And I'm like, oh man, now this tells me there's more than one in here. There's 2 in here, because there's one over here and there's one over there. And you can't, I heard these things are cartoon fast, but you're not going to run 500-600 yards over and hit another tree. So, and it's really weird. Like when they were there, I wouldn't see any wildlife, no deer. I would see no birds, no crows. There was a lot of squirrels in this woods, no squirrels, no turkey, nothing. I would see nothing. And then as I hunted in there over the next 3 years, I would hear whistling behind me over the ridge. And it would be to the left of me. And I'll see if I can do the whistle. It would be like, and it was something larger than a bird. I've heard birds out in the wild, you know. They're kind of got a real soft voice, enough to hear them, but they're not overbearing. This was like something with big lungs, and it was really loud. And I would hear to the left of me. Then I would hear the same thing to the right of me behind this ridge. Then I would hear it behind me. And I'm getting up in my tree, and I'm turned around looking around my tree, and I'm hearing it to the right of me, and then I would hear it to the left of me. And there's 75 yards between the distance. So I would hear it over here, then I would hear it over there. Then I would hear it in the middle. And one time I was like, man, I need to get down and I need to climb this ridge and see what the heck is making this sound.
Yeah.
Because I would be hearing this over and over constantly. And then all of a sudden it would stop, and then it was nothing. And I'm like, what the heck is this? Are these Bigfoots doing this, or what the heck's going on? Then, I'd be there on a day, nothing going on. I wouldn't hear any knocks, and I'd hear whoop, whoop, whoop to the right of me in the thicket where everything's real thick and everything, a swamp area.
Right.
And I'm sorry?
No, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would hear it to the right of me, and then I would hear it to the left of me. And it wasn't like whoop, you know what I mean? Like, did I hear a whoop? No. This was whoop, whoop, like that, really loud. And I was like, oh, it's right over here. And then, you strain your eyes. Like, I'm like straining my eyes to see if I can see part of an arm or a leg or a foot.
Exactly.
Or something's looking through the trees at me. Because I really think, I really think that I was being watched for a long time.
I believe it.
I think in a lot of areas I've been in, I think that I could have walked right past one and never knew it. Because they know how to camouflage themselves, and you can't. It's really hard. Even in pictures I've seen, it's really, unless somebody circles their face, I can't see their face. And I've looked all over the picture on my computer. It's like I can't see it. And then the next thing they circle it, and I'm like, oh, there he is, or there she is. You know what I mean? So I think in Michigan they were watching me for a long time. And I think they kind of felt comfortable with me because I would hear the knocks, the whoops, the whistling. I would hear it all the time. And I think it was 2002. It was like in October. And I had this 7-point come in. And see, up in Michigan, you could bait deer. And I had a big bait pile I was hunting over. I mean, it was a slam dunk.
Right.
Deer would come in. It's like, oh, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. It really is. And I had a 7-point come in, and it was kind of windy, and I didn't hear any whoops. I didn't hear anything all day, and I shot it, and of course, it ran into the swamp.
Oh,
it ran
lovely.
straight. It ran straight away from me, because when I was up in my stand, I was facing directly east, and it came in, circled, and came in from the east. And then it ran. It was probably running where it came from, because a lot of deer do that. When you shoot them, they'll run right back to their bedding area because that's where they feel safe. And it ran directly, tail up, ran away from me. I'm like, oh my God, it's went into that thicket. And now I got to wait 45 minutes. And this was like at 2:00 in the afternoon. And it's like, I got to get down and get in there and get that deer. I can't leave that deer in there. And So I waited, I don't know, about an hour. I climbed down. It was, I don't know, a little after 3. I started in there. I hard shot the deer. So there was blood spray all over the trees. I'm like, oh, I hard shot him. He's not going to be very far. So I walked about 75 yards back in that thicket. I had to crawl through some places to follow the blood and get through there. I found the deer. I'm like, whew, oh, this is great. I'm going to get this deer, and I'm going to, the deer was about 170 pounds. Now I'm in my 30s, so I'm like, okay, I can drag this deer out myself. I don't have to go get anybody. So what I would do is I would walk ahead 25 yards. I put my bow down, and then I would go get the deer, grab his rack, and I would drag him up to my bow, and then I would keep doing that. Well, all of a sudden I start hearing a whoop. I hear another whoop. It's kind of soft. I hear another whoop, and it's like they're to the right of me and to the left of me, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? It's like I can't leave this deer in here, but I'm hearing all this stuff, and my heart's racing, and it's freaking me out because you hear whoop and your head snaps,
Right.
and like you're looking, and then you just pull your head back, and then you hear it to the other side of you, and you're looking, and you're posturing, and you're trying to see what the heck's going on. And so I drug that deer. Up to this point, I'd never done what I'm about to tell you that I did. But I drug that deer back to my stand out of that thicket, that swamp, and I was so freaked out, I left that deer underneath my tree stand. I didn't tag it. I just left. I got my stuff, and I got the hell out of there.
I've heard that many times.
I didn't know if that deer was going to be there, if it was going to get drugged off, because I hadn't even field dressed it. It was the whole deer. I was so freaked out and nervous and shaken. I just got my stuff and got out of there. And I went home, and then, of course, I'm sitting at home all night. I left that deer there. I can't believe I left that deer under my stand. I can get in a lot of trouble. Why did you do that? But I had another 200 yards to drag that deer out, and then up an incline on that 2-track, 50 feet up before I got to the flat part where my car was. And it's like, I was already winded, and it's like, I can't do this. And I'm like freaking out. So I left that deer there, and I'm at home. So the next day I called a friend of mine. His name was CJ. And he was about 6'5" or 6'6". He weighed about 320 pounds. He's a big dude. And I said, hey, I called him up and I said, hey, I shot a 7-point and I couldn't get it out of the woods. And I was wondering if you'd come out there with me. We'll put some plastic down in your van and help me drag it out. And he's like, sure. Yeah, that's no problem. I'll be right over and pick you up. So he came over. We drove over there. We backed his van up to where the ground drops off. And I said, it's not that far back in there. We'll go in there and get it, and we'll drag it, and I'll field dress it, and we'll drag it out. So I walked back there with him, and we're just talking. And the whole time we're talking, I'm looking around everywhere. Like, I'm looking to the right. And so he must have thought, what is wrong with you, Scott?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm looking all over the place. You know what I mean? And we got back there. The deer was totally intact, wasn't drug off. I've heard other hunters talk about, they went to get tools in their car, they come back and their deer's gone and it's been drug off. Or, they cut the internals out and the internals are gone, no blood anywhere, nothing. I've heard all this. So I'm thinking, maybe they drug this deer off and this is all going to be for nothing. So I get back there, the deer's hasn't been touched. It's directly under my tree. No drag marks, no nothing. So I say to CJ, grab one side of the antlers, I'm grabbing the other. Let's get this up over the ridge. We'll get down the trail a little bit and then I'll field dress. So we get down there over the ridge, we get down there, and I say to him, can you do me a favor while I field dress this deer? And he said, sure, anything. I said, can you just look in a 180, 360 around the area while I'm doing this? And he's like, what? I said, can you just look around, just kind of look around so there's no coyotes or anything coming in. So I can, I had to make up a story. I couldn't tell them, can you look around because there's Bigfoots in here?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know what's going to happen when they smell this blood. So I started field dressing that deer, and I think that was the fastest field dressing on a deer I've ever done in my life. Like, I had those internals out, everything, all cut out, and I said, come on, let's go. And we grabbed those horns, and we started down that trail, got to the 2-track, got up to his van, threw that deer in the van, and we were out of there. And I'll tell you what, I was sweating so bad. I never had such a sigh of relief in all my life. Like, I let out a big, big sigh. And CJ's like, are you all right? I'm like, yeah. Let's just get going. So,
Man.
But the end of this whole thing was in 2003. I was sitting up in my stand, and it was in December. And I've been sitting up there all day, and it was getting towards evening, and it was cold. I mean, it was probably about 25 degrees for a high. So I'd been sitting up there fighting the cold all day long, trying to stay warm. And I'm like, well, you know what? The sun's going down. It's time for me to exit out of here and get out of here. So I climbed down the tree, got my bow and everything, popped my flashlight, got it out, made sure it worked, and I started up over that ridge, and I started walking down that game trail. And I got, I don't know, from the ridge, maybe 20 steps, I don't know. And I got hit in the back with a stone.
Oh, man.
And I slowly turned around and popped my flashlight on, because it was starting to get dark in the woods, but it was still light on the outside of the woods. But you could see, but you know how it's starting to get, kind of dark. So I popped my flashlight on, and I'm looking, and I'm going real slow. And I'm looking around, and I see nothing. Now, once again, I don't really know anything about Bigfoot. I've heard people have seen him crawl. I've heard people say they crawl like spiders. It's really weird the way they crawl. A lot of times they're on their belly, and people are hunting for them in the field. So they hear something, and they'll shine up by a tree, and they'll see something, and then they'll say, hey, I see something. And they'll go to shine again and don't see nothing. And the Bigfoot's on the ground on its belly. And I've heard, I don't know how many people that have said that. I don't know that in 2003, I don't know they crawl on the ground. I don't know anything about that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was no podcast having that kind of stuff. So, so I'm looking real slow, and I'm like, that's really weird. It's like trying to get your mind to get wrapped around this.
Exactly.
Like you get hit in your shoulder with a stone, and there's nobody there. Like, there's nobody there. Like, if that isn't enough to mess with your head. And the funny thing of it was, I was standing right next to a pine tree, and I was like scared to death to look up in the pine tree, because I've heard they climb trees. But once again, I don't know that in 2003. I don't know that one could be up, but I thought, well, maybe this was lodged in a tree and it fell out of the tree and hit my shoulder. I don't know. My mind's trying to work it out. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I turn back around, I pop the flashlight off, and I start walking. And I get another 10, 11 steps, and another stone hits me in the shoulder. And it hits me almost in the same spot as the other one. And now I'm freaked out. The hair's up on my neck. I got goosebumps like I do right now. And I'm like, come on, man, what the hell? And I pop the flashlight, and I turn, and I'm going real slow. And I'm looking all over, and I see nothing. And I look down, and sure enough, there's a stone right next to me. And I'm like, I'm not imagining this. I'm thinking to myself, that hit me, because the second one stung a little bit when it hit me. It's almost either the velocity was a little bit stronger, or maybe it was a little bit farther away. I don't know. But when it hit me, I was kind of like, I flinched, like, ugh, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I felt, and I got hunting clothes on and a coat, but I still felt it. So I bent down and I grabbed the rock or the stone. I still have it to this day. And I walked to that 2-track, and in my mind, which I didn't know anything about mind speak, but in my mind, I just said, okay, guys, you can have this place. I'm done. I'm never coming back here. I'm leaving and I'm done. And I hit that 2-track. I got up that 2-track. I got in my car and I took off and I drove home and I never went back there. So I've never been back there since 2003. I never talked to the homeowners. I never had any more connection with them. I just did not go back there. I was too freaked out.
Man.
So that's my Michigan occurrence. And then I have one here in Indiana, which, once again, I don't think there's anything in Indiana. I don't think there's anything that's going to get me or anything like that. But I'm hunting in, well, before I tell you this, I'll tell you, I worked with a Native American and a Native American friend. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to mention his name, but we worked in security at a hospital. And on Saturdays, things were kind of slow. We'd have to work one weekend on, one weekend off, one weekend on, one weekend off. So we usually worked the weekends together, and we were just talking, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to run this by him, but I'm not going to tell him it's me, because I don't know how he's going to act towards me, and I have to work with him. And when you work in security at a hospital where you're dealing with drug addicts and gangbangers and people like that, you got to know somebody, when you go into a situation, they're going to have your back.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't tell him it was me. So I told him the whole thing. And the last part, I told him about the stones. And he said, whoa, wait a minute, back up. He said, back that bus up. And I said, yeah. He said, he picked one of the stones up? And I said, yeah, took it with him. And he said, oh, no. He said, my people believe that if you touch anything they touch, anything, that they're spiritually connected to you, and they'll find you, and you'll see them again, or you'll have another occurrence with them, or an experience with them. And I'm like, really? Okay. So, I don't know a lot about Bigfoot, and who am I to tell him, well, your people are nuts? I'm telling him
Yeah, you're right.
what happened to me. How am I going to sit there and be a hypocrite and say, well, you're crazy. I don't believe that. You're nuts, whatever. He said, no, my people believe that you don't touch anything they touch. Rocks, stones, whatever, you're gifting them. They gift you something back. You do not touch it. You can look at it and admire it, but you don't touch it, because they'll find you. And I'm like, oh, great. This is just great. So this leads up to 2015. I'm on a small wooded lot, probably 40 acres. I got block timber all around me, 100, 200, 300, 400 acre woods all around me. I'm just on this little plot. It's probably, from the woods to the edge of the field is 350 yards, 300 football, 3 football fields. And then on the other side, it's probably 100 yards, and then a road, and then another big woods. And I'm sitting there, and it's in November, it's rut, and I'm sitting there, and I'm, I can't wait. I'm going to bag a buck, because that's the best time. That's when I really hunt hard. And so I'm sitting out there, and I'm hunting, and and I see deer, but I didn't get a shot at anything. So the sun's starting to go down. I'm like, oh, it's time for me to get down and get out of here. I'm not getting out of this woods in the dark.
Right.
Because once the sun starts to go down, and you're in the woods, and you got, I've been down in Wayne National Forest, and when it starts to get dark, if you ain't moving, you're walking in the dark.
That's
and,
right.
When you're in the woods, I mean, you've been in big forests and all that.
Oh yeah.
And you lose your way sometimes because, especially if you can't see stars, or you just see trees in front of you, and they don't look like they did in the daylight. So you're like, oh, wait a minute, do I turn right here? I can't remember. You know what I mean? So you can get lost really fast. And the other thing is, before this all happened, I would shoot a deer. I've been out at midnight by myself in the dark tracking a deer. I mean, out in the middle of nowhere, walking across the creek or whatever, following a blood trail with nobody. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now I go get people.
Yeah.
Unless something drops in the first 30 yards, I go get people. I don't track anything in the dark by myself anymore.
Great idea.
I just don't do it. So anyways, I'm like, well, I got to get down and get out of here. Now, the lay of this is it's a long woods. It's about 40 acres. And then I'm about, as the crow flies, maybe 150 acres from the house that sits on the property. In fact, the backyard butts into the field, and then the woods is right there. And then you got to walk all the way down along the woods, and then I go in. So I pop out of this woods, and that year there was a bean field. I think it was a bean field or mint field. I think it was bean field. I pop out, and for some reason, don't ask me why, I walked out quite a long ways out into the center of the field. And I took a right, and I could see the house, and I start walking down the field. I got my bow, and I'm like, well, I didn't get a deer today, but there's always tomorrow. I saw some, some good deer. And all of a sudden, clear from the back corner of that woods, once again, there's leaves everywhere. So the foliage is all over. You can't walk through and not be heard. You know what I mean? It's loud when you walk. I start hearing something heavy walking right towards me.
Oh.
Like we're going to intersect. Okay. And it's coming. And I'm like, what in the heck is that? That doesn't sound, it sounds like me walking or a human walking, but it sounds really big. And I'm like, oh no. I flash back to 2000, and it gets just on the inside of the woods. Now it's starting to get dark, so I can't see to the inside of the woods. I can see out in the field, but I can't, it's black in the woods. And it stopped just on the inside of the woods. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like really looking, trying to see if I can see any movement or anything, and I can't see anything. And I'm like, man, that's not a deer. That's not a coyote. That's not a bobcat. I know things that are on 4 legs. That's on 2 legs. And it let out a scream. And I'm not kidding you. It was loud. And it sounded, I'm telling you right now, it sounded like a cross between a woman screaming at the top of her lungs and an air raid siren. If you've ever heard a tornado siren,
yes,
how it starts real low and it builds and pitches real high.
Oh yeah,
that's what I heard. And the minute I heard that, I didn't even think. I went right down on one knee. I went right down to the ground. I reflexed. I didn't even think to do that. And I'm sitting. I put my bow in front of my face, and I have these beans around me, and I'm sitting there. I got goosebumps again. I'm sitting there looking over in the dark at the darkness, and I'm like, well, what is this? That was such a loud scream. What is this?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to come out? What do I do? Do I sit here? Because once again, I'm frozen. It's true that these things, they just have something over us that it's either fear or, I don't know if they do it with their mind. I'm not an expert on it. I'm not a field researcher like you. So I just know what I felt. And I'm sitting there with all this fear inside of me, like my heart's racing, and I'm like, oh God, please, not this again. And it lets out the second scream. And this time, it was so loud and long that I felt it in my chest. I could actually feel it. So when people say infrasound or whatever they call it, or, how you can feel it, I felt it in my right breast and my shoulder. I could feel the vibration. That's all it took. I took off. I was like, cartoons where you see your legs move first and then your body? Yes. It was like that. Like I was running the 100-yard dash, the fastest I've ever ran it. I used to run it in track, and I'm like 50 years old. You know what I mean? Right. And I'm running for my life. This thing's still yelling as I'm running.
Oh man.
and it's like the
Oh.
hugest sound. Like if you've ever heard a lion, okay, people have heard a lion roar, or they do that raw like that, raw, and then they roar. Dude, this was 10 decibels louder than that. I mean, it was so loud, and it's still like that. And I'm like running as fast as I can to get to that house. So I get into that yard, and I'm like, screw this. I'm in the yard now. The house is literally 50 feet away. I threw my bow down on the ground, and I'm my hands are on my knees or my legs. I'm bent over, and I can't get my wind. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? If this is what I think it is, I'm going to stand right here. I want to see it come out of that woods. I want to see it. I'm going to stand here. And I want to see it. Well, it's starting to get dark. I never saw anything, Lance. I never heard a footstep. I never heard a growl. I never heard nothing. It never came out of the woods. I never heard it walk away from me. Nothing. It just was nothing. And I'm sitting there dumbfounded, like, okay, I know I heard what I heard. I know I heard these two screams. I felt it. There's something in that woods. Was I going to go in there? No. You know, do I want to go out and find these things? No. Do I want to be sitting in my tree stand and have one walk 60 feet from me and keep looking up at me and walk past me? No. I mean, I don't know if I can handle seeing one. I told a couple guys on their podcast, you know, if I was driving in Oregon or wherever, and I'm driving down the highway at 70 mile an hour, and one came up to the berm of the road and was going to cross, that would be great, because I'm doing 70 miles an hour.
Right.
And I'm gone. I'm past it and gone. So, you know, that's cool. But I don't want to be out in the woods and have something like this happen again. It's just the sheer terror of it.
Well, I think you made a very good point there. And a lot of people in the past I've heard on shows, and I've had a few people say, Lance, I really want to have this experience. I really want to have an encounter. And then I paused and I said, you know, honestly, I appreciate that. I can see the intrigue, the interest, the fascination, the mysticism. But I said, listen, you really don't know what you're asking, because if you truly listen to many of these shows, you see a common theme that these guests, these eyewitnesses that have these encounters, whether it's a sighting encounter or an auditory, they are scared out of their mind. They hope they don't see it. So you don't understand the psychological implication, the impact it'll have for a lifetime if you have a sighting. And well, so you made my point.
It's bad enough in the dark. That's for me, that's more scary than if I would have just seen it in the daytime and it would have just walked across in front of me. Yes, I would have been scared and I would have froze up and stood there and not known what to do. But when it's in the dark and it's like right behind you and it's, you know, maybe 25 yards from you, which is not a big distance, and it will not move until you move, that's creepy stuff. And you can't see your hand, you can't see nothing, and you're hearing it. And then to hear it run and you hear the footfall and you hear how big the footfall is, no, I don't want to ever experience that. I got a good friend in Ohio. I told him about you, that I would possibly talk to you, and that you and your brother have seen him.
Yes.
And he's kind of on the fence. And I said, boy, I wish you could talk to this guy. And he's like, you know, I've been out there not as long as you. I've been out there 15, 16 years, and I've never seen one. And I said, dude, you don't want to see one. I said, you don't want to happen what I had happen to me in the dark, man. It will paralyze you with so much fear, because you're hearing something that supposedly doesn't exist, and you're hearing it with your ears. Like, it's not like, oh, did I hear that?
Yeah, no,
you're hearing it like it's real, and you're hearing it. And I'm like, you know, you could have been watched for 15 years, Mitch, where you hunt.
No,
And
you're right, and that's my dad. We've had this conversation, and my dad, he's 80. He'll be 81 this year, and we had this conversation many, many times at deer camp. We go every year, and he said, "Well, if they're out there, how come over the years of trapping, hunting, fishing, camping, all those things, I've never seen?" I said, "Well, Dad, that's a fair question to ask. It really is. Here's my best answer. I don't know why you haven't, but a couple things come to mind. When you go hunting, do you always have a firearm or some means of protection in your hand?" He says, "Well, of course I do." I said, "Okay. Would you step out in front of you seeing that you had a firearm? Probably not. But and with that being said, how do you know something very intelligent hasn't decided to not step out and just never revealed itself, and you walked right by?" "Well, I would see it." No, not necessarily. If it blended in so well that if it was quiet and you walked right by, you'd never know it. So that's more of the real thing here, is that you don't know how many have saw you, never to
Right.
reveal itself to you, and you walked right by, or you just
Well,
never put things together. You had
right. And I think too that they're a very inquisitive species
oh
because
yes,
they live wild and we're domesticated. We come home and watch TV and whatever. They don't. They're built, excuse me, they're built to be out in harsh conditions and to be out in the wilderness. And we haven't evolved for that yet. We're not built for that. Yes, I go out and hunt 4 months out of the year, but I'm not in the woods every day of every year. I go out in my time that I'm allowed to legally do what I want to do with it, and then I'm back in the house, and I leave it go for another summer, other than to check a couple stands or blinds or whatever to get ready for the upcoming fall season. But these things are, they go several miles hunting. A lot of them move at night. And I can't, I tried to explain to my friend, I can't really explain why this happened to me. I can't explain, he's like, well, maybe it was a bobcat. Maybe it was it. I said, dude, listen, it wasn't any of that. I said, because it was so big when it got up. That's the first characteristic or inclination. It told me it was really huge. And then, it was stealthy and cunning. You got to have a brain to do that. Like it was smart. And then when I heard it run, then I really got the realization of how big it really is, and how huge it is. And then I hear it ripping branches off a tree, and I'm like, you got to have hands to do that, man. There's nothing in that woods that's going to rip branches off.
That's right. You have to have an opposing thumb.
Yes.
To grasp it. Yep, that's right. Now you can have bears will shake trees or limbs as scratching or just a means to just out of boredom, and if they break it, they're leaning over it, they're leaning onto it, and usually they're not massive branches like that.
No.
They'll tear up some trees to mark territory, things like that, grizzlies, black bears, but for the most part, they don't willingly rip limbs like that, nor do they walk around and track your tracks and stop and then start back up when you start running. It's not how they function. It's not their natural instinct.
Well, and if you think about it, it's ripping branches off a tree, and then I'm finding tree breaks. So these things are grabbing trees and breaking them and twisting them. And then here's the stunner for me. I'm listening to somebody's podcast, and there's somebody on it from, I don't know, somewhere out in the Midwest. I don't know if it was Oregon. I don't know if it was Texas. I can't remember where the gentleman was from. But he goes, yeah, and I heard this whistling. And I think maybe he was on Wes Germer's show. And he said, yeah, I heard this whistling. And I would hear it a lot. And it wasn't like a bird whistling. Like sometimes people hear owls, but it's kind of an off of an owl. Like it doesn't really sound like an owl, but kind of like an owl. But it's not. And he's like, this didn't sound like a bird. he's like, this sounded like something really big making a bird sound. And the guy's like, well, what did the whistle sound like? And he did exactly the whistle I did.
Hmm.
And I just about fell out of my chair, because I'm like, I don't know this guy. I've never met this guy. I've never heard him on any other podcast. This is the first time I'm hearing him. And he's doing the exact same whistle. And he lives over 1,000 miles away from me. So if these things aren't real, what the hell is doing that?
Well, that tells you right there. What's interesting is that for something, and here's the thing, to us it's a whistle. But to
Right.
these creatures, these beings, it falls in part of a code, a language.
Right.
It means
Right.
something, in other words, for it to be the same, and then
Right.
so it's a shared commonality, some type of a language or a sound that means something. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that. The likelihood of that happenstance is very remote. So that's what it tells
Right.
me.
Right.
There's some kind. It means something. In other words,
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know if one was whistling to the other when I heard it, if one was, like, hey, I'm over here, and hey, I'm over here, or hey, I'm in the middle, or he's out here again, And I also heard from somebody once, they do tree knocks by how many people are in the woods. I don't know if that's true or real, but if there's 2 or 3 people, they'll do 2 or 3 knocks in a row. Or if there's one person, because I would only hear one knock. That's it. I never heard any other knock. I would hear one to the south of me, and then eventually one to the north of me. And I don't know if they were letting each other know, hey, this person's in here again, or he's in here hunting, or,
Right.
My one friend told me, he said, you know what? I think the reason why they threw stones at you is because they were getting ready to show themselves to you. And they threw those stones at you because they wanted to see your reaction. They wanted to see if you'd run, if you'd freak out, or what you would do. Because like I said, I think they're an inquisitive species. They don't have television. We are their television. You know what I mean? So they'll
No.
throw a rock, you fishing, or because they want to see what you're going to do. They want to see your reaction, because
Well,
they
there's
have a
some.
reaction to your reaction.
That's right. They're very reactive species. So they only react to survive. They do have, I think, in many ways, a sense of humor. Again,
Right.
they're also known as the day watchers, right? That's kind of a nickname for
Right.
them. But I do believe that there is some truth to what your friend said, how you react. And I think even though they may not fully understand, obviously, English, I do think they understand tonality and intent with that tonality, how your body posture is when you say what you
Right.
say, when we say what we say, the loudness, the tone. And so they can sense those vibrations in our voice a lot easier, so they can understand our intent. So I think that possibly your friend is right on track. If you would have turned around the second time and said, okay, guys, go ahead, come on out. I want to see
Right.
you. I want to see you. I'm not going to hurt you. I felt the second stone. I'm right here, and I got it right here. Come on out and just show yourself for a second here, and whatever, Now, I say that easy, but that's asking a lot, and could psychologically have a huge impact, because here's the thing, you don't know how many there were, and usually when you see one, there's others. You don't
Yeah.
know. You hope that there was no aggressiveness, but obviously if they wanted to hurt you with a stone, they would hit you in the back of the head and
Yeah.
knocked you out, or thrown
Or
whatever.
with a bigger stone.
Yeah,
They could have
exactly.
threw a bigger stone at me. A lot
Exactly.
bigger.
And
I think it was totally a reaction thing. But, if I would have seen one, psychologically, maybe I could handle it. But I don't know, 3 or 4 or whatever, they all come, I think I would have totally locked up. I don't think I would have went into shock, because that's a lot for your mind to handle.
it is.
Um,
It is a
and-
lot.
And it took me a very long time to wrap my mind around all this. Like I spent years, I didn't, 2003, I was going through a divorce. This was on my mind, bugging me big time. I had nobody to tell. I had to carry it around inside of me every day. I thought about it, trying to rationalize it. Your mind tries to rationalize, and I'm trying to rationalize it. I know what I heard. I know what happened. I have the damn rock. I still have it. And I'm just trying to figure it all out. So I just broke down and told my wife at the time, look, this is what happened. And I told her everything. Well, I started to tell her, we were at a child support thing and we were sitting out waiting to go in. And I was telling her a lot of the stuff. And she got this grin on her face. And, when she looked at me and I had no grin on my face, and she, the grin left her face, and she was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no, I'm not kidding you. And I'm trying to not lose my mind because of what's happened to me, because I'm really struggling with this, because I can't get my mind wrapped around it to
Well, you're hitting on some points right now that I've been studying on. I'm in the process of writing this book, and part of it is the psychological impact that it has on an eyewitness. Now, when I say eyewitness, it either you're witnessing the creature being in front of you, or the auditory that's not making sense to you. So either way,
Right.
the impact, our minds are always designed to find the solution, find the answer, and it will dwell on that until you arrive, till you consciously come to some arrival of an answer that you are pleased with. If not, your mind goes down this never-ending path or trail on trying to find it, both your conscious
Right.
and your subconscious. So even though you did not see something, the auditory, what you heard and how it followed you, and the sounds that it delivered with branch breaking, especially the physicality of something hitting you out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, all
Right.
of that impacts a person to the point of there can only be one thing that did this, and I didn't see it, but it has shook me up. And so you can actually have not only anxiety issues, but just from what you had, not seeing any being, you can still have a level of PTSD from it, where basically there's definition of that, of course, but it's, there's triggers, which we already know it triggered from the second time you went out, and you
Right.
started, you have a trigger from the first time. Sleepless, infrequent sleep, affecting ability to hold down. Usually it affects in relationships and jobs and things like that. So you can actually have mild, moderate, and severe levels. But it impacts, everything you're saying is holding true to what I've been seeing, what I've been hearing over the last 5 years. So
Yeah.
it's very factual. You are 100% correct in what you're saying. And a lot of people are not aware of the implications of seeing this. They want to see one. Be careful, because if you see what you want, it may not be what you think.
Right. And I told my girlfriend, and I told her about it, and I said, you just can't, I can't explain it to you enough how big this thing was and how huge it sounded. I can still, right now, this was 22 years ago, I can still hear the footfall. I can still hear the thump across the ground. And it sounding like a freight train going down through the woods. I mean, I can still hear it. And it's, she's like, well, how do you go back out there? Like, how do you go behind her house? How do you go out in the dark? I said, it takes everything of me. And I mean, physically, sometimes when I get to my stand, because I got to walk real slow and I'm in the dark in the middle of a woods and I don't have my flashlight on and I'm just walking, trying to be quiet, it takes everything on me. I'm exhausted when I get to my stand. It's hard to climb up my tree because this is in the back of my mind, and it's always going to be in the back of my mind. I'm always walking into a dark abyss area that I can't see.
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Mm-hmm.
see nothing. You can't see as good. And she's like, man, I just wouldn't do it. And I said, well, I came across that bridge a long time ago. And I said to myself, no matter what happens, these things are not going to push me out of a woods. It's not going to stop me from hunting or going out and doing something I have passion for and love. If we can't coexist, well, I'll find somewhere else to hunt, but I'm not, I'm not going to sit here and cower in my house and, sell all my stuff like Kerry Arnold did. He sold all of his stuff. He saw one and had an interaction, and it it threw him upside down to the point where he couldn't even go into a woods for 20 years, I think he said.
Mm-hmm.
And, to this day, it's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to
No.
subside to the fear of it.
That's what
like-
you have to do, and it's one of those things where you have to find some type of bridge. Everybody's different because everybody will react according to your experiences up to that point, your upbringing, what you do for a living. And that all dictates this level of what we call this threshold of fear. And,
Right.
Of course, the encounter itself can be terrifying or just mildly curious, depending on if you're driving in a car going 75 and you see something
Right.
and you go, what was that? And then it's gone,
Right.
Versus
Right.
something when you're totally helpless in many ways. Bow hunters are just that. You are typically isolated alone. You typically, not all bow hunters, but most of bow hunters, it seems like, do not carry a sidearm. They have their
Nope.
bow. They go out.
I don't.
Yep. They go in the deep, dark woods to get close to your target because, on average, a bow hunter will probably shoot 65 is kind of far, but I'm going to say about 45, somewhere in that range or under. Their buck, their deer. And so they have to get close to their target. And so you've got to get up high in a tree typically, and you go in the deep, dark woods because that's where the big bucks are at. And you stay, just like you said earlier, you typically leave when it's dark and you get down when it's dark because the big bucks come out during that time.
Right.
They're very nocturnal. The big ones are, it seems like. And so it takes the time to come out. So just about the time you're losing light and you can still make a bead with your optics on those bows, just that's when they come out. And so, it's interesting you said when on that first one in 2000, when you finally made it into the stand and you were shaking and you heard something still walking and running and walking and running in the swamp, and it was popping and ripping limbs off the trees, you said for about 10 minutes or so. That popping of the limbs, to me, it's the same thing that happened to my brother Lane when in, I think it was 92, 93, when he had his encounter. He was with a buddy, and he saw it across a field, a wheat field. There was absolutely nothing obstructing the view of this creature. It was running across this field with only about 2 or 3 inches of winter wheat. And
Wow.
it was running so smoothly
Yeah.
that it looked like, and this is my brother's words, it looked like a ghostly apparition, like it was floating on the ground.
Wow.
He thought it was an Appaloosa horse at first because the hair was so flowing on it. It was moving so fast. The hair was so long. This was a silvery gray Bigfoot. So we suspect, obviously, that it was older. And it was
Right.
moving so fast, he was getting ready to pop a beer. He had just opened it up, a twist cap, and he was getting ready to take a drink. And he looked out there. They were sitting in the truck, and he looked out there, and he just looked, and he saw something going across the field about 250 yards. And he was looking at that. And then he told his buddy, he said, hey, what's that? Follow my finger right there. What is that? And he was moving quite at a clip. And the guy goes, yeah, I see it. I don't know. And my brother Lane says, is that a horse? So then it disappeared. It was in wide open, and then it disappeared along the creek or riverbank. And, same thing up in your neck of the woods. Farmers, they usually don't cut the trees near the creek banks because it's too steep and they don't want to. The trees are just so big they don't worry about cutting them down, so they leave them. So there's some cover near these creeks and rivers. And so we disappeared in that, and of course it was quiet, deathly quiet, and the windows were down, and that's when they heard pow, snap, pow, pow. It was breaking limbs, my brother said, about the size of wooden baseball bats.
Yeah.
He said you could just tell the crack in what they were. It was just breaking limbs as it was coming down, getting closer. So we had, we've talked about that, and there was other things that transpired from there, but that right there was a signal. I don't want you in. You're in my neck of the woods. You're not supposed to be here. Again, whether there's other family members, whether this is a hunting ground, or this is where I roam and you're not welcome, that's a signal of aggression. I'm the alpha guy here. You're not supposed to be here. So that's the way I take this branch breaking, which we've personally had too. That's the way of saying you need to get out of here. The other thing we've had too, which you mentioned, is this siren call, or what we call the siren, or this combined with it's like a tornado drill horn.
Yeah.
And we've had that happen, and it was three times, and it was a 10 to 15 second or 12-second draw out, and then with about a 3-second break, and then it did it again, then a 3-second break, and did it again. And you could tell it was at a distance, but not too far, but it had a set of lungs. This boy had to be big. Yeah. And so 30 minutes later, we had the whoop, really loud down our road. I mean, it was like right there. So my brother Lane and I, everybody was still in their tent. We walked down that road with our infrared, our lights on, and of course we didn't see any eye shine or anything, but super close. So to us, we just took it that was a siren call. Like, we know you're here. There's some people in the area, and we're letting you know that we're here too. And that's kind of the way we took it. We had other things that transpired over the years, many things, but to hear it that close, that is a very imposing sound, to say the least, especially when you feel it in your chest.
Well, and it's hard to wrap your mind around it, that you're actually hearing something that is yelling at that loud of a decibel, enough to, I remember putting my hands over my ears on the first one, and I could still hear it. And I'm like, man, I can't even muffle my ears. This is so loud. And when you're actually first hearing it and you're thinking, oh Lord, there's something over there that's so big that it can get me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It can get me, and I can't get away from it. And it doesn't matter how fast you're going to run, because I was running for my life. I was running as fast as a 50-year-old man could run.
It's not funny, but it's not funny because I'm like you. I just I'm just trying to get back in that groove again, being mid-50s, and right. We can tell we're not in our 20s, but you're huffy puffy a little bit. So I can only imagine, trying to hurry up out of there. You're getting your heart rate up and everything.
Well, and you're praying to God that your legs are going to move and not give out.
Exactly.
And you're like, come on, man, move, get out of here.
Right.
And then that thing's still screaming like, I'm here and I'm the biggest mother here, and you better get moving, little thing, because I'm going to stomp you.
Yes.
And that's what I got out of it. It was very aggressive. And I've heard accounts where the Sasquatches have been friendly. And I've heard where they've been paralleled and pushed out of the woods, or they've been chased. I think they're a lot like people. I think Melba Ketchum pretty much produced evidence that they have human DNA on the geno scale, but because they do have 10 fingers and 10 toes, male or female genitalia, all that. So they got to have some kind of human aspect. So I believe they're a lot in some ways like us, even though we're domesticated, they're not. They're wild. But it's to a point where, um, some of them are evil. Some of them you better not cross. Some of them will walk past you and look at you and just keep on walking. And there's some of them that could possibly save you or whatever. But I think in that aspect, they're a lot like humans. Some of them are really bad mamma jammas, and you better not cross them. And if you see them, they can be aggressive. They can get, I've heard about all these bluff charges where they'll get down like a runner and then they'll run at you and then they'll stop. I don't know what I would do if I would see something like that. I think I think I'd be in shock. I don't know if my mind could handle it. My mind had a hard enough time handling this.
Mm-hmm.
And, I didn't have one standing there looking at me or blinking at me like, okay, this is real. This is not a person in a suit. I don't believe the whole Patty thing was a person in a suit. I saw a documentary on Bob Gimlin that he was in, and they had the guy that said he was the guy that was in the suit. And the guy isn't even 6.5 feet tall, but he was the guy in the Patty suit. Then he had a gorilla mask head with hair, and it had rubber in the face. And it's like, dude, come on. The compressions are 800 to 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, well,
you'd have to weigh 800 to 1,000 pounds to leave the compressions in the suit.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Well, there's other groups at play here too that want you to, if they can put a little bit of a false narrative in there. If you can get someone to believe something is just totally off the wall and kooky, then and make fun of it, and rank it up there with the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, then they've done their job, right? If they can, they can at least impose one shred of doubt, 1% of doubt, that they've done their job well. And there's there's groups and for another discussion there that do that. They put out these false narratives. But tell me this. So you've already talked about this in the very beginning. So what would you say? What advice would you give a bow hunter? You and I share the same passion. We love bow hunting, and we love the outdoors. I haven't met, obviously, a bow hunter that doesn't really, the true passion is just being in the outdoors. What advice would you give a new bow hunter that's starting in this sport that is, they're somewhat savvy of the woods, but not entirely savvy, and they got hooked, they got the bug of bow hunting? What advice would you give them?
I guess the first thing I would tell them is mind your surroundings. Watch where you are. Don't walk down the trail with your head at your feet. Look up, scan around of where you are. We're all built with this inner thing in our stomach that tells us when something ain't right. If something tells you it ain't right, then don't press it. Back out. You can hunt another day. Just be careful and watch what you're doing, because, I don't know if, I watched the David Paulides stuff, and, they say 75% of the people that disappear in national forests are hunters. Go figure that. It's not, I thought it was just people hiking, but it's actually hunters that disappear. And I mean, these people disappear.
Well, and it's hard to get those figures too, if you follow, and that's one of my passions is reading about missing persons. But one of the most common type of hunter that is actually very hard and difficult to attain real numbers is bow hunters and the numbers of missing bow hunters in each state.
Right.
The very difficult to get. Now, is that coincidence? I don't think so in many cases. I think those numbers are, no one really wants to let those numbers out. Right.
And I guess the other thing I would tell somebody is, there's a lot of things where, depending where you are in the country, there's a lot of things that can get you out there. Not talking about Sasquatch, but there's bear, there's all kinds of things that, wolves, all kinds of things that, I guess the biggest thing is I would tell somebody is don't get in over your head. You know, just don't press things and don't get in over your head, and watch what you're doing and where you're at, and tell somebody where you're going, tell somebody where you're going to be at. I have a step thing on my cell phone, and when I activate it, like if I'm going to go down to Wayne National Forest, it's 9,000 acres. It's a lot of heavy terrain. It's a lot of rolling hills and some mountains, and I put that sucker on when I go in, so that'll lead me within 4 or 5 feet of the door of the car that I'm in or my buddy's car, because we split up. We don't hunt in pairs. We always split up, and it's not funny, but it is, because now, if I go in somewhere 2 miles back in or whatever, and I hear a pop of a stick or a twig, I'm looking, dude. I'm looking all around like, hey, what the heck is that? Before I was, I'd be looking for a deer or something, but I wouldn't focus my mind on it. But now I'm looking, and I'm making sure that, is something coming down this trail? What is it? Whatever. But I really mind my surroundings now. And like I said, if I go into an area and it doesn't feel right, or there's something about it that isn't right, I don't press it. Now, before, like in 2000, I got on my car and it was so quiet. That should have been the first red flag for me. Like I told my friend, I can't explain why I had 2 occurrences like this, and I can't explain why you haven't. I could have not hunted that day, and maybe I would have never had anything happen. I don't know. I also think that maybe I ought to take that stone back up to Michigan.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. You're hitting on some very good points. I hope the listeners are really listening to this, especially people wanting to go out. My brothers and I, we just have this, this adage that, nothing's going to stop us from going and enjoying what we absolutely love to do, which is being in the woods, camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, all those things.
Sure.
But, you need to go with your head on a swivel. You need to know the sounds of the woods,
Yes.
Get to know what the topography. Don't go blindly into an area at dark if you don't know the topography at all. Go in there,
Right.
Make sure the trail that you're going to your deer stand is cut away. If you're allowed to go ahead and clear some brush on the way, make sure that, nothing's going to poke you in the eye or anything like that. Have a clear path to where you're going. We have trail marker tape on the way in, so we have it.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, we have
or
it on
thumbtacks.
Yep.
They have thumbtacks.
Reflective.
On trees.
Yep, reflective thumbtacks. So, you have a way to go in, your path. But that's really, really good advice. I really think, I hope a lot of people that are hunters really listen to that. And, I know a lot of hunters that are extremely experts, and they've never had an encounter yet. And God bless you. I'm glad that you haven't. But just be mindful of the woods and the sounds. And, I was going to ask you about the stone, but also I had a conversation with a guest night before last. They asked me, they said, why do you think I have had more encounters than anyone in my family? I not only have had one, but I've had several, and no one else in my family has had anything, and they're outdoorsmen too. And I said, well, that's a fair question. It's just a difficult one to answer because I can't get in the head of these beings. But I will say this. I do believe it involves a spiritual connection, and I'm being as serious as I can here. I'm a very practical, pragmatic, science-based guy, but I believe that you attract. I'm not saying you were attracting, but I think there has to be something at an energy subatomic level in our spirit that God put there, that we have some level of attraction, and we don't understand it. The other thing is, you're a bow hunter. Bow hunters go deep in the woods. If you want to get a big deer, good bow hunters that are very successful with big buck acquisition. In other words, the big deer, they go deep. Well, it makes sense that if you go deep and you happen to be on properties that you're the only one, or you're going in public hunting areas that you like to go on the backside away from other people, and you get up the earliest and you stay the latest, you might run into some things versus other bow hunters may not, that go in later and leave early. So there's a lot of different reasons why people have that. But, again, I kind of cut you off. My apologies, but I was wanting to know what you're going to do with that stone.
Well, right now I just have it in my dresser, and every once in a while I look at it. But it's like last year I had a 6-point. I was trying to get a big buck, and they were both out in the field in front of me, and the big one walked, and you know how they disappear. It's like I couldn't see him anymore. I don't know where he went, and the little one came over by me, and by the time he got in the woods, it was almost dark. And as well as I do, when they come in, you got to stay up in your tree. If you get down, you spook them, it's over. They won't come back anywhere around there. At least he won't. So I had to stay out in the woods till, an hour, and it was pitch black. And I know my way around in the woods behind my house, but I had to walk in. I couldn't walk the way I came in because that's where he went. So I had to walk through the woods all the way up to my backyard, in the dark. And of course, now I have a flashlight with red on it. So it doesn't, deer don't get crazy. It's not like a regular flashlight. It's red. Mm-hmm. So it just shines red. But I got a lot of coyotes back there. And I was walking just in the dark, and I heard something run. But I'm like, oh, that's a coyote, because he ran and then stopped. And then he just walked out. He didn't run anymore. He was very cunning and quiet, and, he just eluded me and went out. So I'm like, oh, that's a coyote. I'm not going to worry about that. But I got up here and made it. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I'd have been frozen in fear, like, how in the hell am I going to get out of here? Mm-hmm. Can I make the field, make it to the field? I mean, one time I went out in the woods behind my house in the dark to check a game trail. And I'm walking down through the middle of the woods and then out in the field and clear over to the side of the woods to check my trail cam. And I'm like, I was really proud of myself, because it's like, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. There's no way I would have been able to go down through there and walk in pitch black through the woods behind my house. But I also have not seen any tree breaks behind my house or any evidence. I don't know if they're around here. I've never seen anything, or like I said, I've never found a tree break. But, I don't know. You don't really know what's out there. I'm not out there every second of the day.
No. But I can tell you this. I do believe this, that my brother and I we go out quite often. We have been for years. And I can tell you the conversations that we have around deer camp, and I have a brother coming this weekend. We're going to go to a certain site where I live here and stay the night. And I can tell you this, even though our show revolves around Bigfoot and Dogman, there is a lot more out there than what meets the eye, folks. There is things that we have no name for. I'm going to tell you there's things that I truly believe that are extraterrestrial in nature and terrestrial in nature that we just can't compare it to anything from these shows. And I've already taken quite a few calls and done interviews of people that are very, very wood savvy. They live in areas that they work and live in high, remote, mountainous country, and they have seen and come up against things that, in their description to me, I don't have a name for. It is the most hideous, frightening type of creature that I have never heard of. And some of these are just mind-blowing. But
the crazy thing is too that a lot of things, including Sasquatch, travel at night. So there's a lot of things traveling miles and miles and miles that we know nothing about because we're not out there. Mm-hmm. That would probably scare the bejeebus out of you if you ran into it. But and like I said, I've heard some accounts of people here in Indiana that have had problems with Sasquatch not too far from where I live. One guy was a truck driver on State Route 65, and that's, 25 minutes from where I live, and he actually saw a Sasquatch, and there's a lady that was on Wes Germer's show that lives in Indiana, and she had a lot of problems with quite a few of them on her mom and dad's property. They lived on some farm somewhere. They didn't really say where it was, but I was really interested because I was listening to the whole show, and I didn't even know it was in Indiana here. So,
Wow.
but they, there's a big national forest, in southern Indiana down by Evansville, and they found Sasquatch tracks in there. They found
I have no
actual
doubt.
tracks that they've casted.
Yeah, I have no
So-
doubt. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're everywhere, man. They're in New
they
York,
are. They're in every state.
Texas, everywhere.
They're
I'm going to tell you my last thing here. My last episode. I went out to Vegas a year ago. I've been out there 3 times, and every time we go out there, my girlfriend's a gambler. I'm not. But we try and do something together fun. We've done sand rails in the desert, and so she said, hey, she came up to the room. She's like, I know something we can do. And I said, what's that? She said, let's go to Red Rock Canyon. And I go, well, what's Red Rock Canyon? She goes, it's this mountainous thing where you can hike and people climb the side of mountains and all that stuff. And there's a place you can go, and it's a 20-mile loop, and it's got like 12 or 13 stations in it. And it's a place that, tells you where you are. And then there's wild horses and donkeys that run around. I'm like, okay, well, I'm game. I'm already out here. And so we go in there. You got to pay $20 at a park ranger at the gate, and you got this 20-mile loop. And the day we went, actually it was really crazy because it was, 55 degrees was a high in the desert. I mean, it was, and we're dressed for, because the other times I've been out there, it's been 100 degrees. So I have, nothing really warm. I have a coat, and I was wearing a cowboy hat and sunglasses, and we came up to the first couple stations, and people were hiking down in the ravines, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So we go to I think it was the 3rd or 4th station, and we went to, there was a lookout, of course, and I'm taking pictures with my phone, and I'm like, it's all desert and then rock, and it's beautiful colored rocks. It's just really beautiful. And I'm like, this is really cool. This is a neat thing. I'm glad I'm here doing this. So, I had to tie my cowboy hat. It's like a string that can go under your chin, and it's got a little ball, and you can tighten it up.
Oh, right.
And I have it around my cowboy hat, and it's really windy. And I'm like, well, I got to put this on, or my hat's going to blow off, and I'm going to lose it down in a ravine, and I'm going to be screwed. I paid quite a few bucks for the hat, so I didn't want to lose it. So this one staging area, and they got a cliff, mountainous thing, and there's a thing that says there's a pyroglyph back there on the side of the wall, and they dated, it's really old. They don't know who did it. They don't know if it was Native Americans that came through, whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I've never seen a pyroglyph other than in a picture. So, this is cool. And people were coming out, and, we're like, well, how far do you have to hike back? Oh, they're like, it's not that far. It'll be real quick. So we're like, okay. So, we got back in there. I got up on a big rock and stood and had my picture taken. And then, I'm, 55 years old. So I'm like trying to figure out how I'm going to get down off this rock. That was about 6.5 feet up. I climbed up on it, but then I'm like, how in the hell do I get down off this rock? And my girlfriend's laughing at me hysterically because I'm on my stomach with my legs dangling over the rock, trying to step down on, a rock or something to climb. It was, oh my God, if she'd have taken video of it, it would have been so embarrassing. But I got down off the rock. We were looking at the pyroglyph. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm taking pictures of it. And all of a sudden I hear somebody talking, and we're the only ones there. Right. And I'm like, why do I hear people talking? I'm looking around. I'm looking all around me. I'm like, do you hear that? She's like, yeah, I thought I heard somebody talking. And it wasn't samurai gibberish or anything like that. And I'm like, I happen to look up, and there's a guy 7 stories up climbing. He's free climbing this rock. And he's got a little red helmet on. And I'm like, hey. And he's like, what? He kind of yells down at me. And I was kind of like, wow. He sounded kind of pissed or whatever. I didn't want him falling or anything. But he was standing up there. And then he had a rope. And his wife was down on the ground. And she was the one that was talking to him. He just wasn't answering her. But we couldn't find out where she was. So it was a little freaky.
Right.
So it's kind of windy and everything, and we're just kind of talking. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm an explorer, and every time I go to hunt a new property, I go out and explore the heck out of it. I walk all over. I see where deer are coming from, where they're bedding, where they're going, where their travel routes are. I know their patterns are going to change. They're just like humans. We do the same thing for a while, and then we change. And so I explore. And so I said to her, hey, I'm just going to walk this way off the trail, and I'm going to go out there a ways in the desert. I want to see if I can, see a rattlesnake, or if I can see a tarantula. Like, I want to see some wildlife while we're here, because we didn't see any horses. We didn't see any donkeys or anything running around. They say they're just wild and running. I'm like, I want to go see if I can see something. I said, you just stay here, on the trail. I'm going to go off the trail. And I just started going north through the mesquite, winding around. I was very careful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the ground and everything. And I'm, making sure I don't run into anything that I'm, a snake or something like that. But I'm like, it's going to be cool to see something, take some pictures. So I'm walking. I go out about 125 yards, and I come to this clearing in this valley. And it opens up, and all of a sudden there's no wind. There's nothing. It's just dead quiet. Like, I remember taking the string off from underneath my chin. I'm like, wow, it's like a little warmer here, and there's no wind. And I come upon this rock stacking, and there's rock stacked. And then over here's another one. And then over here's another one. And then over here's another one. And they're stacked so crazy that I'm like, I can't do this. I couldn't stack rocks like that. Now, I've talked to some people. They're like, there's clubs that go around and they stack rocks, and it's like a thing that they do. I didn't know anything about that. But this is out in the middle of nowhere. This is a football field and 25 yards away from the trail. And these rocks, some of these rocks that are for the bases are big. They're pretty heavy and they're pretty big. And I just, like, the hair, like, went up on the back of my neck. I'm like, there's something about this. Something about this ain't right. And I'm taking pictures, right?
Right.
I got pictures of I can send them to you. And there's like a bunch of rocks that shouldn't be sitting. They should look like they're going to fall off. And then there's a little tiny rock sitting right next to the other rock. It's not like, to me, being common sense wise, it's not something a human being would do, not something a person would do. And, if you're in a rock stacking club, okay, I'm trying to be common sense about this. If you're in a club, or you're going to come to this part of the park and you're going to stack some really cool rocks and make it look cool because that's what you're into, wouldn't you do it on the trail where people can see it?
Of course.
Why would you do it a football field away where nobody's going to go? Nobody's going to walk out there and see it. So if your thing is to stack it so people can go, wow, look at that. I'm going to take a picture. Oh, that's cool. I wonder who stacked that. That's, wow, that's the rock's teetering like it's going to fall, all that stuff. You're going to do it where people can see it. You're not going to do it out in the middle of nowhere. And I have read some articles where Bigfoot stack rock, where there's a family down in Tennessee that had Bigfoots on their property, and they would go in where they had canned stuff, jars, and they would break the jars and eat the fruit. And they seen them stacking slate rock They would stack it up so high. And these were like, some of them were 4 feet off the ground. And they had big base rocks for the base. And then, you know, they would have smaller rocks, then a great big rock on top of a small rock. It was the weirdest. Like, once again, I'm at that point, like, something ain't right about this. And I'm not pressing this. And there's no wind here. Everything's dead quiet. And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to back out of here, and I'm going to go back to where I was. And I took all the pictures. I got pictures of everything. And it was just really weird to me. And once again, you know, I got back, and as soon as I got back to where I was, the wind picked up, and it's 25-mile-an-hour gusts. And why it's not windy there and it's windy where I am, I don't know. But something, you know, I think back to, you shouldn't have picked that stone up, Scott, because I don't know if this is another way that they're connecting with me. I don't know. But I'm clear out in Nevada in the desert, and I run into this. And it's not on the trail anywhere. It's not on the trail. Okay, so I can't wrap my mind around how come it's not right here where everybody can see it in a cluster or spread out where this pyroglyph is. Why is it way out there?
Yeah. Well, I think there's areas all across this planet too that have very interesting energies. That we may not yet fully understand, but I bet you there's people that do. And so I was going to ask if you took any of those stones.
No, I didn't touch one of them. I didn't even touch them.
Yeah.
Because I thought back to my Native American friend I worked with that said, even if you're in question, don't touch it. If you leave something, like I have a friend that has a podcast in Missouri. Okay. And he saw a big male Sasquatch on his property behind his house. Okay. And I was on his podcast and we were talking, and I said, "You got to be kidding me." He goes, "No, I saw him." And he wasn't aggressive. He just got up and he just walked away from me because he hunts his property. He's a deer hunter too.
Okay.
Bow hunter. And he said he just walked away from me. And he said, "I've heard him scream out in the back really loud. Couple times, 2-3 times over a year, I will hear him." He said, "And I take him fish. I have like a bucket thing. I'll bring him fish, and I'll bring him 6 fish, and he'll take 3 and leave 3 for me. Or I'll take 4, and he'll take 2 and leave 2 for me." He said he's very gentle and very nice. Goes back to what I was saying about some are evil, some aren't. They're a lot like us. He said, "I came out of the back of my house one day, and I was just looking straight ahead, and I seen movement, my peripheral vision. I looked over to the right, and in the woods on the other side of my blacktop driveway was a juvenile Sasquatch standing there. And it looked over at me like, uh-oh, I'm caught." Like he said, the look on its face, its eyes got kind of big, like, "Oh, like you're not supposed to see me." And he said, that thing bent down and took off. And he said it was so fast, I couldn't even see where it went. It just took off. And he said, "You know, I'm an arrowhead hunter. I hunt for arrowheads." And he said, "I've never found an arrowhead anywhere on this property. Never. I've looked all over the place. I can't find anything anywhere." And he said, "I went over to where that juvenile was standing because he said I wanted to go over and see if I could see any kind of footprint, whatever, because he's like, I wanted to really make sure I saw what I saw." He said, but it was only maybe 30 yards from me when I saw it. He said, "But I went over anyways because you know how your mind is." And I said, "Yes." He said, and right over where that little juvenile Sasquatch was, he said it was about 4 foot tall. And he said where it was standing was an arrowhead. And he said he picked the arrowhead up off the ground. And I got a picture of it because I sent him a picture of my rock, my stone, and he sent me a picture of the arrowhead. And the arrowhead looks kind of like a Sasquatch. It looks like it's got a convex head to it, like a point, and it kind of comes down. and it looks kind of like a Sasquatch, like the outline of it,
Wow.
of the head of it.
Incredible.
Yes. And I was like, I got to see it. Send me a picture of it. So he sent me a picture of it, and I'm like, it blew me away. He's like, I've never, up till that moment, ever found an arrowhead on my property. Nowhere. And he said, I went right over there where that juvenile was standing. I saw it clear as day. It looked at me like, uh-oh, you know, a human seen me. And he said, man, it was lickety split. And he said, I'm telling you, it took off cartoon fast. Like it was gone. And he said, I can't believe how fast they are. I just can't believe it. And he said, I walked over there and there was an arrowhead right where it was. So I don't know. I'm like, you know, we got to get together and deer hunt or something. I'll drive out to where you are because, you know, I don't know if I want to see a Sasquatch, but, you know, because he's like, he sees the male every once in a while.
Right.
So, yeah. So I'm like, wow. That's just a wow moment.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's so many of those too.
Yeah, he said, I go out there all the time. I'm not afraid. He said, it's never acted aggressive to me. It just moves on. It'll look at me and just walk. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no, and it's about 8 foot tall. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no, but he goes, there's a place where I leave food for him. And he said, you know, it won't take all of it. It's like it's giving back to me, like it'll take, you know, a couple fish and leave me a couple fish for my family or whatever. So he said it must have seen my children, my wife, you know, and know that I'm here with a family.
Yeah.
So they're incredibly smart.
Oh, very.
I mean,
There's a reason
Yeah.
for that. There
Yeah.
is a reason for that. But hey, I want to be able to maybe call sometime and chat with you on some other things. We'll
Sure.
go ahead and wrap it up here, and then. But Scott, I just really want to thank you so much for calling in and really sharing your knowledge and just some personal. You know, it is personal. You know what happens to someone, how it happens, and I want to thank you so much for doing that and just kind of having the courage to share, because it's not easy for people to call in and share exactly what happened to them, because once you have something like this happen, it becomes a part of you and you think different, you feel different. And so I just really want to thank you so much, and I'd love to call you back sometime, and it does not have to be a show. I just want to chat.
Well, you're more than welcome to anytime, because I know you're a deer hunter too, and we got to all stick together. It's a brotherhood, and I appreciate you letting me come on, because the thing I've realized, because I've been on a few podcasts, and I've read some comments of people, and they're like, oh my gosh, this guy again, like, you know, this thing's fascinating, and you know, he's a good storyteller, but man, he's on a lot of podcasts, and it's like, what people don't understand is when you go through something like this, or you see a Sasquatch, immediately, like I said, your mind will not let you accept what you're seeing. It will try and water it down, or, you know, make it so you don't go into shock because you're seeing something that you've been told your whole life that it doesn't exist. So when you have something happen that's a very dramatic experience, and you don't tell anybody, like I didn't tell anybody for 3 years. 3 years, I told no one. I kept this inside of me the whole time, working at my job, around my children, all that, until I finally spilled the beans, to the point where my own sisters, I told one after, 22 years. I never told anybody in my family. So for me to get on and talk with somebody like you, or Matt Knapp, or Wes Germer, somebody like that, who has had their own experiences, once again, it's a brotherhood. So,
Absolutely.
I just appreciate you letting me come on here on your podcast and do this, because it's the only therapeutic thing we have other than going and seeing a shrink. And when you go and see a shrink, you kind of think a little bit like you're crazy, because we associate people crazy going to a shrink and talking to a doctor, where this is average everyday people, bow hunters, deer hunters like yourself and me, that are out there, and we run into things, and it's a lot like a bump in the night, or a nightmare, or a scary thing that can turn into something really bad. So it's very therapeutic to be able to come on And I know some people have probably heard me talk about this several times now, but it helps me. I've sat here the whole time. I don't know if it's been an hour, a couple hours, but I've had goosebumps from head to toe because, like I said in the beginning, every time I tell this, I'm right there again. I can smell what
Absolutely.
the woods smell like. I can hear this thing get up. I can hear it walk in behind me, and I'm in pitch black darkness, and I can't see anything. And like I said, for me, that's more terrifying than if I would have just seen something during the day.
Really, it is. We're more terrified of what it might be or the possibility sometimes than actually seeing. And I know that doesn't make sense for people hearing that, but it's
No.
movie directors, producers, they understand this. Those people that write the scripts to these horror films, so that's why they have the creaky sounds, and you don't see the image yet. It's still coming up the stairs. You don't see it. You don't see it. You don't see it. So it's this anticipation, this building up. In the movie industry, they do that very well. But I tell you what, it's been a pleasure, Scott. And go ahead. You're going to say something?
I just like to say one more thing.
Sure.
To people that are out there hiking in national forests or camping, just please mind your surroundings. Just watch what you're doing. Watch where you are. If something doesn't feel right, man, don't press it. And, because a situation can go really bad really quick, and it doesn't have to be a Sasquatch. It could be a bear. It could be rutting season for moose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be anything. There's people out there, Lance, that you could have hardcore video with 1080p of a Sasquatch walking, and they're going to tell you, this person in a suit. There's just certain people walking this earth that aren't going to believe you.
Of
that aren't
course.
going to believe me. That aren't going to believe you've ever seen one. And that's okay. It's fine and it's okay, because after all this time, I really don't give a sorry to say that on your podcast.
No, that's okay.
If people believe me or not, I know what I heard. I was there. I know the scream I heard. It was real, and I know what I went through. And when it gets to a point where you're scared to walk into a woods in the dark, and you're a grown human being, you're an adult and a grown man, and you got the fear of a 10-year-old boy inside you because you had something like this happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you don't believe me, because I was there and it really happened. So I know there's people that, like I said, they're not going to believe pictures or videos. They're always going to say, that's a man in a suit. And they're not going to believe it until you bring one in and they can actually really see it. And I get that. I understand that. But for us, people that have experienced this, if we don't tell somebody or get it out there, you're going to go crazy. I think if I wouldn't have eventually told my ex and then told a couple of my friends that kind of understood, I think I might have lost it, because it was very traumatic. And like you said, maybe I do have PTSD. That's why I have a hard time walking out in the pitch dark in the woods, because every little crack or whatever, I'm like, I'm starting to freeze up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This will freeze you up.
Absolutely.
You will freeze.
Circumstances under high emotional states really carve out a deep psychological rut. And it can happen in an instant, especially because a lot of these high anxiety, stressful, or PTSD moments that many of us have, we associate another human being doing another human being wrong, or, whether it's divorce, war, terrible accidents. It was another human with an action on another human. But with these creatures, it is a human with a non-human, a non-human biological entity. And we're told that monsters don't exist ever since our childhood. Right. So in a millisecond, we find out that these creatures do exist. They are real. They have an intelligence enough to flank us. They're yelling, and then you start seeing this in a matter of moments, and now you don't know how to process this. So in my mind, this PTSD is really kind of a post-traumatic creature disorder. PTCD is what I call it. And so it's different. It's a different level of PTSD than other types of events and deep wounds. So I want to thank you again, buddy, for being on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time with me on this. I know we've been chatting here a while, but you know what? That doesn't matter to me. I just want to know what happened. And I'd love to follow up and just chat sometime and see how you're doing.
Oh, like I said, no problem. And I have a deer in my backyard. I have a motion light, and there's a deer in my backyard right now. It's funny. We're
fabulous.
talking about deer hunting.
Fabulous.
But I got a raccoon and a deer out there right now. But I want to thank you, Lance. Seriously, you can call me anytime. And
Great.
Please, seriously, be careful out there with you and your brother. Or if you're out, I heard where, you were saying that you go out by yourself. And
yes,
I'm going to tell you, don't press things. And, just watch what you're doing. I don't want to hear about you disappearing.
Yeah, no, I won't. I've been doing it a while, for a long time, so I have my planning set and my contingencies, and I kind of operate on the same level of if something doesn't feel right or look right, then it's not right. And so I just kind of listen to that inner voice, that spirit that says, this is what you need to do next. This is what you need to do next. But I go with no aggression. I go with automatic, peaceful intent. Although you may have that, you still cannot predict what a creature, a wild being, will do. So that's just it. But I appreciate that very much. And I wish you the best. I hope our conversation has helped in some way. And you can call me anytime. You can text me anytime. And if I don't get with you immediately, I will return it right back.
Well, and if you get a chance, and you do get a chance to get a picture of one, I'd appreciate it if you'd send it to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because my best friend in Ohio that I hunt with a lot, he's on the fence. He's the guy that, I've hunted for 15, 16 years and I've never seen one. And I said, just because you've never seen one doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Absolutely.
Okay? That's just how it is. And so if you ever get a chance, I would love if you'd send me, if you get a chance to get a good enough pic of one, it would be great, because I'm going to run it right over to Ohio to my friend and say, okay, buddy, here it is. You know what I mean? So
yes. Well, I'm going to go to some places. I've got plenty of photos. I've got lots of photos, but not one that I feel comfortable enough to say, here it is in the wide open. I don't even have to circle anything. You don't have to guess. It's not blurry. Here it is.
Even if you had one walk through at 60 yards or 40 yards and just walk past, even if you had your phone up taking a picture, you could get a good clear photo, of one, just walking through. Oh my God, would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. And there's people that have them. They do. They just are apprehensive to share them. And I don't blame them one bit. And there's people that have them that's, they're just.
They're going to get a visit from a man in black.
Yeah,
that's what
you've got to be careful. You do have to be careful.
Because the government knows all about this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
They brought dead ones out of. I read an article where they brought dead ones out of Mount St. Helens when Mount St. Helens blew. Back in the day, the government came in to clean a bunch of stuff up. There were some soldiers there, and there was 4 or 5 of them on a trailer with a tarp over them, and the guys could see one of the hairy hands hang out, and the sergeant major or whatever said, you know what, just turn around, it's none of your business, and keep on working, and you don't tell anybody any of this. And this came from a guy on his deathbed that told his family, this is what happened, and I saw it with my own eyes. So the government knows.
Oh, yeah.
They know about this, and they're going to shut you down.
Oh, yeah. That's their MO. That's what they do.
Yep.
So.
Yep. All right.
All right, buddy. Well, you have a great evening. Thanks so much, and we'll be talking soon again.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Lance.
You're welcome. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, what do you guys think?
This was I really appreciate him coming on here. What I found fascinating with this and why this was so important, I wanted to get him on because he let me know ahead of time. He said, Lance, I didn't see anything, but I got to tell you, I heard something that, it has to be what I think it was. There's just nothing else because you can hear he was an avid hunter. He knows what things sound like, all the indigenous creatures where he was around, in Michigan and then in Indiana. So many incidences have happened like this where people haven't told anyone because it wasn't a sighting. Many of you listening right now will go, well, I didn't see anything, Lance, so it's not anything, it's not going to be one of those great shows. I really don't care. When I do an interview, I don't do it based on whether it's going to get a bunch of likes. I just want to share because there's a lot of people out there that are having these encounters that say, well, I heard something that scared the living bejeebies out of me, and it couldn't have been anything else because I know what everything else sounds like. So I want to tell somebody. And this was bothering this gentleman so much, and he had multiple incidents that it made sense. I do believe that it was some type of a cryptid creature, a Bigfoot, more or less, is what my primary thoughts are here. Could it have been something else? Very possible, very possible. But because of the sounds, the vocalizations and everything, I'm saying it was a Bigfoot in these instances. Now, on the rock stacking, it's kind of hard. I know that there are groups that do that, and they do it actually quite a ways away, just out in the middle of nowhere. And I know some people that do that way off the beaten path on these trails. So could it have been a human, when he went to the Vegas area outside of that? Sure, it could have been. But, I'm kind of with him. If you're going to do it, don't you want other people to notice and of this rock stacking? But I'm so glad he came on. I appreciate him coming on. You could tell it still bothered him. He still had these triggers and reoccurrences. But every time someone shares, it helps just a little bit more, and a little bit more with coping. And if that's you, give me a call anytime on our toll-free number, and we can talk. I will usually return the call within 24 to 48 hours, guys. In the meantime, I really appreciate you listening. I hope this has been educational. I hope you've learned something. And if you go out in the woods, please watch your back. Watch other people's backs. Listen. Don't keep your head down. Look up. Every once in a while, stop, listen, then walk, stop, listen. It's kind of like walking and stalking, right? Someone that walks slow sees a lot. Someone that walks fast sees nothing. All right, guys. Until then, take care. This has been Lance with Monster 911.